every single person in the world, like no matter how good they are, have things about them that aren't the best.
I come back to this again and again because one of the questions that I get asked a lot is like, how do you come up with a really good name for your character?
It doesn't matter.
I don't care.
Activate your energy.
Welcome to the Activated Authors Podcast, a show where we distill the core principles of what it takes to become a happy, healthy, and productive author, no matter what stage of the journey you're at. I'm your host, Daniel Willcocks. I'm an international best-selling author, as well as an author coach, speaker, and creative entrepreneur. But most importantly, I'm a lifelong student of all things productivity, psychology, and human behaviour. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. Without further ado, let's dive in.
What is up, activators? And welcome back to another episode of the podcast. You wasn't expecting that, were you?
No, you don't normally throw it to me, and I think it was particularly mean to do it while I had a mouthful of water.
I don't plan this stuff. It just goes better than I ever expected. How are you, Sam?
I'm good. How are you, Dan?
I'm good. Cool. What's been going on?
Here joining with me every single week is me. Hi, it's me, Sam Frost.
Oh my God, yeah. Jesus. I'm Daniel Willcocks, and here with me every single bloody week is...
It's me, Sam Frost.
How are you,
Hi.
Sam?
Oh, I'm okay. I'm not okay. How are you?
I'm wonderful.
Are you?
My cough is getting slightly better. Finally. Still there. Still very, very annoying. But it's getting slightly better, which is good.
Yeah.
But it's been a busy old week.
Yep. You've done a lot of work. I've done a lot of despairing at the medical system.
Can I share it?
Yeah.
Okay. The very short version, the thing Sam had been waiting 5 weeks for from the NHS after they said, here are the next steps. Be on painkillers for the next 5 weeks, well, up to 8 weeks until this happens. You'll receive a letter in the post. Was never put forward at all by the doctor that said it was going to happen. So we're putting in a very, very, very aggressive complaint and trying to chase that up because it's disgusting.
Yeah, and I'm
over it.
Yeah. It's one thing to like hold on knowing something's going to happen, but when you find out that the last like 4 or 5 weeks of your life have been a lie,
a downright dirty dog lie,
it's difficult to deal with. But yeah, other than that, which is all consuming, I'm okay.
It's peachy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Peaches and cream.
Yeah.
I like peaches and cream.
I don't had that in ages. Summer. The season of peaches and cream. In my side of things, in the Activated Author side of things,
yes,
our Discord is now officially free. Our community is officially free, and people are dropping in like flies, but not in the way that flies die when they hit the electric, in the way that the Activated Authors bolt makes them really, really activated and energetic.
You're happy with that?
I am so happy with that.
Okay.
So welcome, little flies. But it's really exciting seeing people drop in, literally, and getting involved in the conversation and seeing all the channels beginning to bloom and blossom and everyone getting to know each other. And so welcome to all of our wonderful new Activated Authors.
Welcome to our wonderful new Activated Authors that are fully human and in no way
dead flies
that vomit on food and rub poo in their hands.
So welcome. And what else is happening? Oh, so this is quite exciting. I'm putting a shout out on this podcast because this is going to go live on Monday, the of July, which is also around the time it goes live on The Other Stories. So for people that don't know, I am one of the co-founders of The Other Stories podcast, which is horror fiction, comes out every single Monday, 11 million downloads in 7 years. It's kind of incredible. I am writing this year's Halloween episode, or I say episode, special, which is 7 episodes of story, which is Alice in Wonderland meets H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos. And the story is wonderful. It's popping. I'm very, very happy with it. And we're now at the point where it's about to go into production with all of the narrators and the editors and everything else. But why I'm bringing this up is because we are putting together, or have put together, an opportunity for anyone who wants to have their voice featured on the podcast and heard by tens of thousands of people can do so. Like, it's kind of fucking amazing. So what we're doing is there's a part of the story in which we've got a cult that is basically just relentlessly saying this very Lovecraftian phrase, which I'm not even going to try and say because I don't have it in front of me, and I've done a whole tutorial video on this on the website. But if you want to get your voice featured in the podcast, as I say, heard by tens of thousands of people, you can go over to theotherstories.net/dream, and there's a tutorial video which teaches you how to say this phrase. You can upload your file and it will be featured on this year's podcast, and you'll be credited, and it'll be wonderful and magic.
That's pretty cool.
It's really cool. I'm really excited because obviously the more people that get involved, the better it's going to sound,
Yep.
because it's going to be this whole like whoa, 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 you know, like better than that, but like
One would hope.
yeah. So
So what Dan is saying is, do you want to be part of a cult?
you want to be part of the cult? If you do, then join us. Theotherstories.net/dream.
And it'll only cost you £800. It does, as I'm
Per
joking.
entry.
Per word.
Per word. But yeah, it's all the stuff you need is over there. It's going to be a lot of fun. So if you do want to get involved, absolutely go for it. And like, even if you don't have an incredible mic setup or anything else, like you can just do it on your phone, record it, send it in, and make sure you put your name so that we can credit you and put you into the credits. So
Yeah.
super exciting. And then that's kind of the main updates. What's something you've enjoyed this week?
Oh, I hate this question at the minute because I've enjoyed little. Well, actually, I've enjoyed the fact that, so I found out this whole thing, like that not only, you know, was the test and things not recorded, but it wasn't put on my notes. So we're quite literally back at square one. I found that out on Monday because bless Danny's been chasing a lot of stuff up for me, because just a lot of the time I am exhausted and in a lot of pain. Hence why this episode, where we are together in person, we're doing it on my bed because I can't really sit on like hard chairs or anything like that. So
Let's not isolate that audio.
So Dan delivered the news to me via Zoom, and then was like, no, I'm coming down. And so Dan wasn't supposed to be with me this week. Poor guy was supposed to get a break from me.
True.
Yeah. But because of like just the general shit show, you jumped in your car and you've been helping me once again all
It
week.
fucking sucks.
Yeah.
And like it's not a strong enough word for it. Like it's atrocious is what it is. But yeah,
But
working it through, finding the answers.
it's just yet another validation of who you are and who I know you to be. And the fact, yeah, so I've enjoyed the fact that my support system has been very supportive. So even though everything else sucks, one of the good things in times like this is you really do see, and everyone says it, but I think until you go through something pretty gross, or like, you know, gross in the sense of like it's hard, it's bad in your life, you don't really see the people that are like ride or die in there for you. And this has really highlighted that for me. And it's surprising sometimes the people that you think would be there for you and then aren't. But yes, so I'm very grateful and happy for you.
Activated authors, join us. You're very welcome.
Dan will come stay with you for a week.
Yeah.
I
What?
won't. I'm very anxious.
£2,000. Now, the thing I've enjoyed this week. So, Legend Planner. Bye. I'm not doing Legend Planner again. I'm not doing Legend Planner again.
But you still mentioned it.
Yeah, because it makes me laugh now. I had a thing. Oh, so the thing I've enjoyed this week, not too dissimilar to yours, is evidence that some of the friendships that I made in Pittsburgh are good friendships, and people are still reaching out. And like the last few months have been really nice for me fiction-wise, because I've begun to find, or like to really what's the word, to really resonate with my niche, to kind of know what my plans are going forward, and to find people, like I've been saying for a long time, like, and I'm going to say this, and some of it might come across as a bit I guess pretentious and just a bit grating, but
Go
like,
on.
but know that like there's no shade thrown at anyone at all. This is literally like a path that I've discovered along the way. But the further you get into the author business, and the further, you know, you grow like platforms like Activated Authors, you know, I've had books that have hit like the top of charts that have sold across like Germany and other places. Like I've done pretty well with my writing, but you get to a point where when you're looking for the next step, the pool of people who can support you gets smaller. It's just a fact of life. Like, if you are brand new to writing, there are a plethora of options available for courses, for mentorship, for groups, for all of these different kind of things that you can go to, and you're like, okay, let's learn how to write together. Let's learn how to publish a book together.
Yeah.
And I've now reached a point where I've published over 70 works, 70 books, 50, 60 short stories. Like, I've done a fair chunk of stuff. And so finding the people that can take you up to the next step is very, very difficult to do.
Yeah.
Like, I've been saying it for, well over a year and a half. Like, it's hard to find the fire because there are fewer people around me that are doing what I'm doing, or near enough approximating to what I'm doing, to spur you forward. And I think it's fundamentally key to find those people who will push you and will test you. And again, in Pittsburgh, I was surrounded by a lot of those people, and a lot of people that were ahead of me, and a lot of the people that were doing incredible things that I'm looking at and going like, that's what I want to do. And a few of those people I've become friends with and I've been chatting to, and there are some things behind the scenes that, like, they're all very tentative at the minute, but might be that kind of push out the door that I need. And so we'll see. But that's just that side of things. It's nice to feel like I'm beginning to recognize very strongly where I am, where my current limits are, where I'm doing well, and just pushing to make that stuff happen. And a lot of that, if you really want to find that clarity, is have a medical emergency, end up in hospital, and then review your entire life. I'm joking.
And at the same time, just like have a partner that has a full physical breakdown as well.
Oh man, yeah, find one of those. Timing.
10 out of 10.
But yeah, like, all joking aside, I've been trying to narrow down to this for a long time, but sometimes you just need a slap around the face to go like, just fucking do it, you idiot.
Yeah.
So,
or a punch in the heart box.
Or a punch in the heart box.
No
fun. So that's the thing that I've enjoyed this week. And then in wins from the community.
Yes, what's our win from the community, Dan?
Goes to our boy Rob.
Yeah.
So Rob had a month off between day jobs and managed to hit 40k words of a new series. So took the time out to become a full-time writer for a little while. That's a oxymoron. But absolutely loved it. And I think now has a bigger fire than ever to make this full-time. So
yeah,
go Rob.
Yeah, go Rob.
Get it. So before we go into this week's question, I do just want to very, very quickly shout out to all the people that have transferred over and who've joined us over on our Discord. So a big hello to Lynn, Ed, Dennis, Daniel. Hey, that's me. Sienna, River, Emma, Rob, Kiz, Brenda, Shane, Carla, Michelle, Ryan, Pan, Colleen, Grace, Megan, Martin, Rebecca, Dan. That's me twice. Josh, Katie, Karen, Esther, Quentis, Bobby, Edwin, Ara, Peter, Jeff, Melinda, Jess, Harley, Faye, Demetrius, Lynn, twice, Lena, Linda, Lisa, Marcia, Michaela, Miriam, Ruth, Michelle, me, Julie, Renee, Rianne, Sarah. That's actually not me. That's a different person that's put themselves as me. Judith, Jeff, Carolyn, Mel, Liz, and Kevin, and Daisy.
And me.
And Sam. Why you weren't? Oh, I know why you weren't on that list. That's fine. Like, I know why that is. And Sam is here, of course.
Hi.
Hi. Hi. This guy says hello. I want to kill myself. But yeah, I just wanted to shout out absolutely everyone and say thank you so much for jumping over. Even if you haven't yet commented on the Discord, if you're getting super involved, like all the things, you're welcome, and
It's
we
so
love
cool.
having you.
Yeah, we do love having you. It's very cool.
Yes. So into this week's Questiono.
Yes. This week's question is, will Sam yawn before she manages to say it?
Yes.
Answered yes. This week's question is, how do you write or create a compelling protagonist?
Do you want to get the fan?
No. I have a fever temperature. I don't want to get the fan.
Oh, I'm
I've
sorry.
got it.
How do you complain?
How do you complain to
How
your
do you complain
protagonist
to a protagonist?
that your person on your left has made you turn off the fan when you've got a fever temperature?
Yeah. How do you create a compelling protagonist? So, big question,
Yeah.
big answers. You don't come to Activated Authors for small talk. So there's a lot to dive in here with a compelling protagonist. I think for me, one of the biggest things to note from the beginning is you have to make them human and you have to make them relatable.
Mm-hmm.
And so those two things don't always work together. But I think the protagonist has to be someone who the reader can experience the story through. You know, the protagonist always stands as the avatar for who you're pretending to be, almost, when you're reading that book and going through it, and you're experiencing everything through that person. And as such, your reader often, depending on what genre, because obviously there are always exceptions to the rules and there are, you know, anti-heroes and things, but often the protagonist is someone that your reader is going to want to connect with on a morally positive level. You know, there's the whole save the cat thing, like with villains. I think, you know, you have to have a protagonist that hooks the reader in and goes, I'm a nice person, but I'm in a bit of trouble, and here's how I grow, and here's how I get better. And you know, that's the other side of it as well. You have to have a main character that's going to grow through the story. So if you have someone that's very out of the box, boring, plain Jane or Jim, who doesn't really get up to much, isn't really memorable in many ways, your readers are not really going to want to pursue that story, isn't going to remember a lot of what it is they do, what it is they're up to. So when it comes around to creating my protagonists, and bearing in mind, obviously, a lot of the time I'm writing horror, but I do think a lot of this transfers, because one of the key things of making a good horror is making a character that the readers relate with. Because if you don't care about whether or not the main character survives, then it's not a good read. You're just begging for someone to die for 300 pages, which, you know, isn't great. Don't read my journal. So so when I'm starting with my characters, I tend to have to be fair, I start with my monsters, which arguably are my antagonists, because again, this is very sort of horror centric, but I think it can cross over. But if I know what the evil is that they're facing, then it helps me create the journey for the main character. So if I know that, you know, there's a hulking great monster in the woods, I know that my character at the beginning has to have some form of weakness to that monster. And it could be, you know, strength wise, just very, you know, physical attributes. They might just be quite meek, and they have to either create a group to tackle that monster, you know,
they have a horrendous phobia of woods.
Yeah, exactly. Like, they might have to train themselves for something. And again, like those psychological things could be a case of, you know, maybe it's, if you, in the case of sort of Pennywise the clown, you have a monster that can create all of your darkest fears. So as a character, you have to learn how to overcome those things that are stunting your growth in order to then come out on the other side better. In sort of typical, you know, thriller or fantasy stories and stuff, often it'll be, or if we use fantasy, for example, you know, you look at someone like Frodo Baggins, who arguably isn't the main character of the story, Sam. That's not a dig at you, that's Samwise.
I know.
But Frodo at the beginning is very untested with adventure. He's very, you know, he comes from a community that dissuade people from going on adventure. They're very like cliquey, they have their lives, they have their routines, and he suddenly kicks out on this test to see whether, you know, he can tackle the big world. And he's a tiny person. Like, that's deliberate. They haven't picked, you know, a 7-foot elf.
No,
they picked a 3.5-4-foot hobbit to tackle this on. So creating those contrasts of the character versus the actual bigger story and what it is you're trying to achieve,
the scope of what he has to do,
they have to synchronize in that way, because a story is built from friction points, and it's built from overcoming obstacles. And if you have and, you know, again, exceptions to every rule, I've seen stories that do this, but for me, if you've got a character that is all powerful, all knowing, you know, can basically conquer anything, and I would argue, I haven't finished watching Wednesday yet, but from the first couple of episodes I watched, she can basically do everything, which is a little off-putting for me. I haven't watched the rest of it yet, so that's just an initial thing. But to have a character that, you know, there's no room for growth, like, you know, Superman, for example, I think is quite boring.
Superman is
as
boring.
A character. The story isn't.
Yeah, well, I think that's because, like, mind you, I say this, there are a lot of superheroes that, or costumed heroes, that are very compelling characters in themselves, and actually they do have to go on that journey. But Superman would be considered like a catalyst main character. So what that is, just in case you've not come across the term before, a catalyst main character is someone that through the journey of the story changes very little, but by being who they are is a catalyst for change in others and the world around them. So actually, with something like Superman, who I agree, I find Superman incredibly boring. I mean, you could take Cap, for example. Captain America is Superman done right.
Yes.
Because he has darkness in his past in the sense of his own personal struggles. But he's lawful good, like on the line for a long time.
Yeah.
But he does change to closer to chaotic good because of the
Mhm.
people. But because of his morals, because of his die-hard belief in doing the right thing, he affects and changes the world around him in a very positive way.
Mhm.
And so in those kind of stories, you're looking for those story arcs from the people around the main character and the world around the main character.
Yeah.
But Superman is boring.
Oh yeah, no, I think as a character again, like, because there's a difference between character and story.
Yes.
But they must work together. And I think in order to create a good character, there are a few sort of vital components that you need. You need to know what it is they want.
Mm-hmm.
You need to know what their sort of fundamental weaknesses, or what quite a few people call their core wound.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what is it that they haven't overcome? What is it that is going to be their big block for the story? So again, like a very small example, Ron's terrified of spiders and has to tackle spiders, and throughout the story, like, you throw these things at them. It seems a bit sometimes overtly on the nose, but that kind of stuff matters. It works.
Yeah.
And so you need to know what they want, what it is that they're absolutely terrified of. And then to create a good character, main character, you have to create a good supporting cast.
Agreed.
Because the supporting cast should in some way complement the weaknesses of the main character and give them opportunities for growth.
Mm-hmm.
So those moments where they do disagree, those moments where they don't get on and they're like adamantly, you know, at each other's throats trying to choose a different path, those moments matter.
Yeah, they do, because they're real as well.
They're real. They create that path for growth. But also it's oh my god, it's totally slipped what I was going to say out of my head. It was very important, so make sure you remember that. Yeah, and then at the same time you have to, you know, thread the character through the bigger story and kind of know what you're going there. So like there's a lot to balance, there's a lot to think about.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, at its core, it's, you know, when I'm writing horror, and what I really try and do is write the humanity in horror. So I like to put characters in dire situations so that everything else that is superficial just washes away. So in When Winter Comes, I have quite a few different main characters. I have a main character. So the story centers really around a character called Cody. And Cody's a 16-year-old boy who has been transferred from England to Alaska with his uncle, because his uncle is on a research trip and has recently become his guardian after Cody's parents have both died in a car crash.
Mm-hmm.
And so for Cody, his pain is, you know, how can he make friends? How can he trust that people are going to be there for him when he's now like away from his home? You know, everything he's known that's familiar is gone, and he's now just plunged into this town with his uncle. His uncle never wanted children, but obviously has that family connection. So for Alex and his storyline, there's him learning how to be a guardian and learning how to be there when, like, you know, work has been his focus, and now he's suddenly going. So without giving too many spoilers away, like Alex's arc right at the end, like he overcomes that, and in fact he transforms into a complete other direction.
Yeah.
When I wrote the first draft of that story, the ending was different because I hadn't recognized, because it was a multi POV story, I hadn't realized that Cody was the main character. Like, I knew it was important, but I hadn't realized it was his story. So it was a different ending that I went back and rewrote to give Cody that wrap up that he needed, that transformation that he wanted. So he ends up finding a place to belong. It's not always exactly what he wants, especially in horror. But it's those kind of things you need to think about. Like Tori, who's one of the female leads, is a social media influencer and has thousands and thousands of followers. That's her life. Like, she's isolated in this Alaskan town, and that's her way to connect with people through digital worlds. And so when creating her, I was like, well, okay, the worst thing that can happen to her is suddenly the internet's gone, and everything that gave her validation disappears.
Gone. Yeah.
And so her journey is overcoming that, and again, bonding with people in the real world. And because she's one of the only people in that town that, because of how she sees the rest of the world through the screen, she rejects the rituals and the traditions of the town that she's in, because it's a very sort of it's not Inuit, it's still modern, but it still runs it's still very old-fashioned in many ways, because they don't have all the modern technologies apart from a few cell phones and things. So it's these things that I'm thinking about when I'm creating these characters. Like, what is it that they are doing, and how can I stop that to make them grow in a way that will be satisfying for the reader?
Yeah.
Now, I've spoken a lot this week, so over to you for a few. I'm just gonna pop this down.
For those listening, Dan just shamelessly flaunted the cover of When Winter Comes across the screen, rightfully so. It's a fantastic book. I agree with I was going to say I agree with a lot of what you just said. I agree with everything you just said. I think it's very easy, particularly if you are writing like your first big work, to want your main character to have it all and, you know, be the best, and all of their friends and family always say the right thing without any kind of contrast. Because often what happens when you're writing is you write for escape, and we wish that we were all the things, and we wish that like our parents and our siblings and our friends always said the right thing to us and could always support us in the way that we would want. But it doesn't happen because it's not realistic, and putting something like that into a story is essentially boring, because the point of story, as you've said, is conflict. It's about overcoming. It's a mirror to humanity. Whether you're writing about humans or hobbits or, I don't know, werewolves, whatever you're writing about, the person that's reading it, we assume anyway, is a human being, and we relate to stories because they are a mirror to reality. And so we don't want to read about someone that's perfect and everyone around them is perfect. We want to read about someone that is deeply flawed and has a lot of shitty circumstances, and yet still gets up in the morning and keeps going and can overcome and like reach that life or that goal, or bring about that change that is so important to them, because that's aspirational. You can't just change yourself as a person to be perfect, and I mean, you know, that doesn't exist, but or make people around you amazing and incredible and always say the right thing, because it's impossible. So there is nothing aspirational about reading about someone like that, because you can't aspire to it.
No.
All you can do is be like, this is annoying and upsetting to me. But if someone is in a crappy situation, or they're in arguably a great situation, but there is something that is stopping them either enjoying it, or, you know, it's not what they wanted, then you start to create like little seeds, little grains of sand in the oil, and you can tell like something needs to change. So I think just off the bat, it's really important not to create they call them Mary Sues, I think, which is a character that's like perfect and like great and happy. And apparently it's quite a common thing in, you know, first time when you're first writing stories and things, for that to happen.
Well, yeah, I know authors that don't like hurting their characters.
Yeah.
And, you know, I get it. Like, you want to, again, as you say, like, there's that part of, as a writer, where it's the escapism of creating the world that you want to see. But as a reader, you want to root for a hero. You want to see the problems, but you want them to overcome that problem.
Yeah.
And it's one of the conversations I've had with Bailey a lot over the last year or two, because he can be quite sensitive to when things go wrong in films. You know, he's 8. It makes total sense. He doesn't want bad things to happen.
No, of course not.
And, you know, trying to explain to an 8-year-old that bad things have to happen so that the heroes can win.
Yes.
Like, otherwise, there is no story.
Yeah, there are no heroes.
And it was very interesting. Edgelit last weekend, the weekend before, whenever it was, I was listening to a panel with quite a few crime and horror authors. And one thing that they said that I think relates to this quite well is that as much as we want stories to reflect real life, satisfying endings don't always come in real life. No. And again, that's one of the reasons we read. So many investigative cases from police don't get solved. No. In every thriller book that you read, it will be solved in some way. And again, this kind of goes back a little bit to our tropes conversation. Like, there are certain things. You need
the good guys to win.
You need the good guys to win, and you need the good guys to struggle. And, you know, we're kind of getting a little bit into the story arcs of characters at this point, but you need a hero that you've set them up so that they can have the darkest night of the soul, where they really have to dig deep into themselves and go like, I can do it. Like, everything's right. The Moana moment when she's about to sail away from Maui because she can't do it and she's just been defeated by the lava monster and things. That moment where like everything's going wrong, and then you just get that one glimmering moment of hope, and you go, I can do this, and you rise and you overcome. And it's like, that's the beautiful moment.
Mhm.
And that's why people will sustain their attention for 70, 80% of that story, because they want that moment. And if that moment doesn't come, as I've seen in certain places, or if it's not big enough compared to where they are when they began, which is why it's important to have like that strong want and that strong wound, then you're fucked.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's so unsatisfying. Like, it's certain, like I have read a lot of short stories for some of the anthologies that I've put together, and there have been some stories in there that I've read because I'm like, they're fantastic prose, they're beautiful, and then they get to the end and I'm just like, no, no, you were so close, and it just wasn't enough, or there just wasn't any kind of closure or anything there. And you don't want to come away from a story feeling unsatisfied. That's one of the reasons that people really struggle with cliffhangers. But yeah, getting slightly off track, back to main characters. Just make them good, please.
Look, the question is, how do I make them good? And you're like, make them good.
Yeah.
What I would say is that there is a couple of things that, for me personally, are essential for a main character. So a lot of the things that you've said, like at their core, they need to be morally good. Whether that is like to the letter law abiding or like chaos incarnate. If I'm reading a story about a main character that is, in whatever genre, I need to know that I can like stand with them. So at their core, despite what they have done in the past, despite that maybe what they're doing now, I need to know that they are a good person. And you can do that by, like you said, it's the save the cat moment, because that can work if you're writing like an anti-hero or someone that's just like, let's take Katniss for example. She's very unlikable. Like when you're reading, like especially like when you're reading the books as opposed to say watching the films, she's not a great person.
No.
But that moment that when she volunteers for her sister, and even before then, you see the reasons why she is how she is, and you see the love that she has for her sister, and even the love she has for her mother, because you can't hate someone that much without loving them. It really it keeps you with her even though she's a bit of a twat. So knowing that someone at their core is a good person is important. Like you say, knowing what their like main wound is, but also understanding that like we are complex animals, and having one big thing that's going to be your block is important. You can't write lots and lots of different things because it gets bogged down in lots of things. But just having things that people have, so like you can have one big wound, say it's abandonment issues, but they can still be also like maybe afraid of spiders, or have a dislike around, I don't know, red Volvos for some very specific reason. It's important for them to have things that make them uniquely them. So whether it's little quirks, or it's phobias, favorite foods, or like they'll only eat this type of thing, just to kind of ground them in reality. And then also with things like that, it gives you throughout the story, you'll find places to play with that. And then I think it's really important as well for them to have qualities that are not likable. Because every single person in the world, like no matter how good they are, have things about them that aren't the best, because we are flawed creatures. So it's important to put those things in, but they can't be unforgivable. So it's like, for example, in romance, there's always that like moment where for whatever reason the couple are like pulled apart or separated, or there's a misunderstanding or something. Like you can never have the reason they're pulled apart be abuse or cheating, because those things are unforgivable. And you can't then reunite the characters. And it's the same, like your character's main flaw can't be that they once stabbed a puppy and liked it. It could be that they once ran over a dog on accident, and like that they've created some really unhealthy coping mechanisms around them, and that makes them unlikable because of how they've dealt with it. But it cannot be something that would be considered like evil or unforgivable, because then you've just lost your readership. So
Yeah,
the big internal wound, which is, you know, like that has to be like deeply rooted. So if you look through like psychology and things, they call it the blueprint. And it's from like in your formative years. So the first kind of like from birth to, like, some people say 2, some people say 5, where kind of all of your brain is knitting together its expectations of how the world works. And that's informed by obviously your parents or your guardians, your environment. All of those things give you your core values and your blueprints, your core beliefs about yourself and about the world. So like, for example, if we're dealing with a main character that was abused as a child in whatever way or neglected, their main wound is going to be that they are not lovable, that they're worthless, essentially, or at least it's likely to be that, because that is a realistic expectation. That is what happens, is you believe you are unlovable because, you know, the people that are supposed to fundamentally love you and care about you no matter what didn't. So that creates that belief, and that doesn't just show up in one way, it shows up in lots of different ways. So I think it's important to have this main wound, have this thing that you have to get over, but understand that people, again, are complex, so that will show up in different ways. I'm writing a novel, well, I'm planning a novel at the minute, and the main character, a lot of the things that she does is self-sabotage, but self-sabotage again comes up in a variety of different ways. So whether that is like the way in my head at the minute, I want it to open with her just having sex with a random person in an alley and her best friend being like, can we please go? Like, stop this, we need to, because like it's just that thing of there's lots of different ways.
Did you give him his gum?
So yeah, I think just understanding human psychology and like how different things play out is really important, because then as the story unfolds, as you're writing the story, there will be moments that you can be like, oh, hang on a second, this is going to like push against this button, or this is a moment where they have to decide whether they stand up to this or they walk back. And you know, they have to walk back sometimes, they have to run away sometimes. So I think like fundamentally the key point is make them human, but obviously that's just saying it like that isn't helpful. So I'm hoping that, I mean, I waffled, so I'm hoping that I've covered some ground.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think just to highlight a couple of points from that, and also expand a little bit on examples of, you know, wound and goals and stuff. Like Katniss is a fantastic example, and the reason that she is so compelling, you know, she doesn't like her mum, but she loves her mum, which is already painful in itself. She loves her sister and realizes that she's almost a surrogate mother for her sister because her mother's not a great person. And then when it comes to the Hunger Games and Prue is called forward to enter and Katniss volunteers as tribute, what she's saying there is, I have to do this to protect my sister, even if it means I'm going to die, which would then make her worst dreams realized because her mum and her sister will be left alone. So survival is paramount. Like it has to happen. And it's a very similar setup in Jenna Moreci's Saviour's Champion. So Tobias is a very similar situation. He's trying to look after his family, and in order to do so, enters a tournament in which obviously to win would give everything he wants, but there's a very, very strong chance that he's going to die. And also
to win gets everything that he wants for his family,
but not for him. Yes, it's a self-sacrifice. So you know, you've got stuff like that. Obviously, we said about Frodo. One of the most compelling things about Geralt of Rivia from The Witcher, who arguably is an anti-hero, is that he has been rejected by society, but he needs society to survive. You know, people hate witchers, but they know that they need them. But like, he's constantly harassed and attacked anytime he enters a town
until they need something to kill a monster,
and he needs them for coin and food. Like, it's that friction makes for a lot of good stories, because then he meets people along the way that he likes. He meets people along the way that, you know, he finally learns to trust people, and then they like break that trust. And so creating those situations is huge. And I think as well, like, 2 more points from me. The one thing I love about this conversation, and I think has highlighted something that I feel very, very, very strongly about.
Mm.
Notice how to make a compelling protagonist. Not one of us has mentioned eye color or hair
Oh.
color or clothing, but you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like,
yeah.
when you first come to creating characters, often you're like, this is how they look.
Mm-hmm.
And while that can obviously create a very distinct character, like let's, again, Geralt's very long silver hair and like striking eyes and all that kind of stuff, like that adds a lot and that can help them be identifiable.
But that is informed by who they are.
That's informed by who they are.
Those choices are informed.
Yes.
Yeah.
So starting from the center, from motivation, from fear, is one of the strongest ways to make a character that the reader will relate to and the reader will remember.
Yeah.
Like the rest of it is just, it's paint. Do you know what I mean? Like
yeah, it is.
Like you can add all that stuff. Like I've read books where they've not even said about what the protagonist looks like. Like Chuck Palahniuk is very, I mean this really positively, but thin with his prose. It's very like pacey and fast, and you don't get a lot of that extra detail because you don't need it because the story is compelling enough. So that's a big thing. Like absolutely have fun coloring in your characters, but remember that they're people at the very heart of it.
Yeah, you have to draw like you can't just get pencil crayons and start coloring in something that doesn't exist. You have to draw them first. For
sure. And the other thing as well is I come back to this again and again because one of the questions that I get asked a lot is like, how do you come up with a really good name for your character?
It doesn't matter.
I don't care. Like you can play very cleverly with names. You can come up with names for villains that are very striking, like Severus Snape is very like snaky and sizzly off the tongue.
and what's the main character in Jessica Jones what's he called?
We're doing very well today.
I know. Sorry, I'm really like I am not well enough.
Google it while I talk.
I don't know where my phone is.
Oh my god. Did so well. Jessica.
It's people are going to be screaming at me listening to this. It's like
oh my god.
Because she says something like, "Oh, that what was murder coffin taken?" and it kills me.
Jessica. Kilgrave.
That's it.
There you go.
Kilgrave. Yeah. She's
so
like, what? Murder coffin was taken.
Yeah. So you can have fun with names like that, especially for like bad guys. But I always come back to the fact that one of the most famous protagonists on the planet ever,
the most boring name,
is Harry Potter. That's not an exciting name.
No.
Harry Potter. Like Draco Malfoy, dragons, like evil, you get some of that sense, but it's Harry Potter. And I think actually that plays in his favor because of how plain he begins with. And obviously his whole journey is stepping into his brilliance. But yeah, I'd say absolutely try and find a name that I think works for you. But I'll often start stories if I don't have a particular character name and just put in brackets like name bracket because at the end I'll just go Control F or I'll just pick a proxy name and just fit it in. Like there was a character again in When Winter Comes that was called something a bit similar to another character, and there was no reason for that name. It was just what I started with, and so when it came to the final edits, I just did Control Find Replace and just swept through a different name. Yeah,
I think we do get very caught up in naming our characters, but the truth of the matter is, as a parent, I know that when I named my son with his father, the only thing I was thinking about is I don't want him to have a name that's like everybody else. I don't want him to go to school and they're like, I don't know, like Connor or something.
Or like Dan.
Yeah, like Dan or Sam.
There were a lot of Dans in my ear.
Yeah, and you become like Sam W, and there's a Sam F, and there's a Sam G, and like
Dan, Daniel, Danny.
Yeah.
D-Dog.
I wanted him to have a name that was unique enough that he wouldn't be like one of 12 in every room he was in, but not so unique that he would get the absolute shit ripped out of him constantly. Yeah. I wanted it to sound nice. They were my main concerns. I wasn't like, what name means birth of the sun?
Yeah.
Like, don't care. So I think my takeaway from that is we put in way more thought to naming our characters than their parents would. And so for the most part, you don't need to. Just think about a name that you like that maybe is a little bit interesting.
Tiffany.
Unless you have created, say, like a race of creatures in your book that like have very strict traditions on naming and thing, in which case you just need to set those rules for yourself, and then that should actually become easy to help you.
Yeah, as you said, there's always exceptions and things. So if you're writing fantasy, obviously your names will be a bit more fantastical. If you're writing, in certain countries, there'll be different names and stuff. But broad strokes, don't overthink it. Just find what feels right.
Yeah, find the big things internally what's their morals, what's their wound, what do they want, what's holding them back, and what is keeping them from aligning fully to their integrity. And then you make a cast of characters around them that either highlight their flaws, because that's always a fun thing with, like, you know, kind of like friendships, and I mean, like, that character's presence highlights their flaws, not their friendship, like the friend, because that's a bit of a dickhead. Also, like, any kind of weaknesses you can fill in a little bit with those characters, and then just throw the fucking world at them, basically.
If they're stumbling, break a kneecap. A story. There we go. We are evil puppeteers of pain. But yeah, I think that wraps it up. If the camera for people watching on YouTube starts shaking, it's because there's a pug now emerging from his cocoon.
Hi, JC.
But we'll wrap it up there. And so just a reminder for people, if you want to join myself and Sam on our live community, join us over at activatedauthors.com, and all the info straight in the banner, or go to activatedauthors.com/join. If you want your voice to be featured on this year's The Other Stories Halloween special,
and why wouldn't you?
And why the hell wouldn't you? You can go over to theotherstories.net/dream.net, please, because .com was fucking taken. Not salty at all. And I guess there's nothing left to say other than a massive thank you to you, the listeners, for tuning in. We appreciate you and the time you choose to spend with us each and every week. And as always, if you're looking to level up your writing and activate your author career, head on over to activatedauthors.com to find out all about our community, our resources, and everything else that we've got going on. One more time from myself.
And me.
We'll see you next week.
Goodbye.
Putting you on the spot this week.
I don't like it.
I'm sorry.
You're really ill. Let's fuck with you. Main characters.
Activate your energy.